We are in Perek Lamed Hey today. This will be our last shir before Pesach. Next week already, and I'm sorry to say this, to remind everyone, we're already doing Hagolas Kalim next week. And so Pesach is coming, but we don't want to miss out on this Perek, because this Perek is the partner to last week's Perek. Last week's Perek talked about the downfall and the destruction of Edom. Whereas this week, we're now talking about the Geulah, the ultimate redemption of the Jewish people. As was true of last week, however, this week's Perek is a situation where we really aren't 100% sure what it means. And so there's a lot of images that are being drawn by Yeshayahu in this. This Perek was most likely written a little bit later in life. It repeats many themes that are found elsewhere in Yeshayahu when he's talking about redemption. And it's a brief one, and so we don't want to get too caught up on all the details, but just see how there is this description of what will happen. And so in Posuk Lamed Aleph of Perek Lamed Hey, it begins, Yisasum Midbar v'Tziam, that the Midbar and the Tziam. Now, a Midbar is a wilderness. Tzia is a wasteland. We're going to see in a moment an Arava that is going to come into the play as well. And the Arava is the plain. All of those will rejoice. All of those will rejoice. And says Rashi, which is an interesting point, Yasisu alehem. They will rejoice over or on them. And the question is, who's the them? There's some maps over there. Who are the them? So the Radak says, very simply, it's the Jewish people. They're going to rejoice over the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel itself. The Maharid Kras says, Yisisum al Mapalat Edom, that actually they're going to rejoice over what happened in the previous Perek, the downfall of Edom. However, the Yisisum may not be over them. It may not have a suffix, which we're thinking of as the mem being alehem. The Ibn Ezra says, for example, that this is just a poetic suffix. And as a result, it's just rejoicing. And it's not rejoicing over them, but the wilderness and the wasteland are going to rejoice. Now, we're going to see there are three different geographical locations that are mentioned here immediately: the wilderness, the wasteland, and the plain. And why all three? So the Yalkut Shimoni, and I don't bring a lot of midrashim in the course of this year, but the Yalkut Shimoni is a beautiful piece. And he says, B'sha'ah, this is Yalkut Shimoni right at the beginning of this on this Perek of Yeshayahu. B'sha'ah shakadosh baruch hu megaleh shchinato al Yisrael. When God reveals his Shekhinah, his presence to the Jewish people, Eino nigla alehem b'pam achat. It doesn't come all at once. The Jewish people won't be able to sustain themselves, be able to stand that kind of amazing goodness, and they might die. And think about Yosef, how his presence he revealed slowly. He says, if Yosef's brothers couldn't stand the fact and were shocked when he said, I'm Yosef, I'm still alive, can you imagine what would happen if HaKadosh Baruch Hu all of a sudden revealed himself once again to the Jewish people? So what does God do? Nigla alehem kima kima. He's going to reveal himself a little bit at a time. Masis et achirim, shenemar yisasum midbar v'tzia. First, he's going to have other things rejoice. Ve'achar kach v'tagel arava v'tifrach kechavatzelet. And then it's going to be the joy of the plains, and there's going to be the blossoming of the chavatzelet. Ve'achar kach paroach tifrach. And afterwards, we're going to see that it's going to be blossoming. And afterwards, there's going to be the glory of Lebanon. And only afterwards will the Jewish people see God. And so when it talks about the plain old-fashioned rejoicing here, it could entirely be that, no, this is just the poetic way that Yeshayahu is beginning to describe to the Jewish people the gradual redemption, the gradual salvation that will occur, and it's going to start here and then step by step by step. Now, the Malbim points out that in these phrases, when we talk about midbar and we talk about tziyah, v'tagel arava, and the plain will rejoice for tifrach kechavatzelet, and ultimately it's going to blossom like the chavatzelet, like a lily. The Malbim says, actually, we need to understand there are differences between these kinds of places. On the one hand, you have Midbar and Tziyah. Midbar and Tziyah are places, are desolate places that are missing something in nature. There's something natural missing from them. There's water missing. There's something missing in those places. However, Arava, he says, is something that should blossom. What it's missing is our involvement in it. And therefore, he explains this piece very differently. He says, when I talk about Midbar and Tziyah, it is a poetic way of describing the place of the non-Jewish world, that they're going to ultimately have one form of rejoicing, a sason, yasisu. The sas, or the sason, that's a simcha that is going to be an external simcha. The simcha they're going to have is that they've been saved from their enemies, that Edom has been vanquished. But in Eretz Yisrael, there it's going to be the real kind of joy. It's going to be the joy that's an internal joy. And that internal joy, that arava, v'tagel, the gilah, is going to be the kind of joy that's the one we're seeking. So with the downfall of Edom, in the beginning of the salvation, the beginning of the Tkufat HaMashiach, gradually we talked about the Medrash, but also it's going to have an impact on the entire world, but the impact on us is going to be the greatest. But tifrach kechavatzelet, and it's going to blossom like a lily. Just understand that what this is trying to talk about, according to Dat Mikra, says it's drawing for us this picture that the entire area of the Arava is going to be covered with vegetation, with flowers. It's going to look like the Arava itself has totally blossomed. Now, if you remember on the map of Israel, which I passed out and I also sent out, the Arava is the area right here. Okay, this is the Arava. These are actual areas within the land of Israel, of course. Continues the Navi, Paroach Tifrach, that there's going to be this blossoming. And it's not going to be a blossoming that's happening once. It's not just something that the Navi says, God is going to come, boom, and you're going to have something good, but rather it's going to be consistent. There's going to be a tmidiyut with it. There's going to be a regular tafrach. It's going to be blossoming and blossoming. V'tagel af gilat v'ranan. And it's going to be the gilat, and the singing is going to go along with it. There's v'tagel, gilat, v'tagel af gilat. The Mitzudat David says it's going to be a joy after another joy. And according to the Dat Sofri, with the Ranen, with the singing, what's happening here in the singing is people are going to burst forth in song because of the Geulah. Kivod Levanon nitanla, the glory or the honor of the Levanon will be given to it. Now, who's the it? Well, the last subject actually was the Arava. The Lebanon is up here. We know where Lebanon is, okay? We really know where Lebanon is here. But when we talk about Lebanon, we always think about the cedars of Lebanon, of the massive trees that grew in Lebanon. And so what's going to happen in the Arava, the honor of Lebanon will be transformed. Arava will be transformed to be a place like the honor of Lebanon. We'll have these massive forests will start growing in here. Now, there's a fascinating piece, by the way, and I think I've mentioned this before. I believe it is found actually in Yechezkel Kaufman's commentary on Sefer Yehoshua. If any of us, all of us have been to Israel, when we've been to Israel, you see, one of the great disappointments of going to Israel is when you see the Jordan River. Okay. It is, the sanitary canal looks better. Okay. It's this little nothing. Okay. You see the Jordan River. And so in Kaufman's commentary, he talks about the fact that actually the river at the time of Yoshua was a mighty river. It was a big river. And on both sides of it, there were massive forests that exist. And so when the river stopped, when the Jewish people came to cross, that was a major nace. Because otherwise, if you think about it, and I've been to all different places along the Jordan, what's the big deal of crossing the Jordan River today? You can just walk right across it, basically. It's not like crossing the Mississippi, right? And so as a result of it, the Arava, you could also say, and I haven't seen this written anywhere, and I'm just suggesting maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, that the Arava will actually be transformed to the way it had been when the Jewish people first occupied the land of Israel. That maybe those cedars, the Kavod HaLevanon means it's coming back, but not just there. Hadar HaKarmel v'HaSharon. It's also going to have the beauty of the Carmel and the Sharon. So if I'm looking, the Carmel obviously is the mountain right, this area right here, where Haifa is today, is the mountain of Carmel and the mountain regions along it, and the Sharon as well. That area will be given to the space. The Arava will grow. Now, what's the difference between Lebanon and Carmel and Sharon? Well, if we remember, the Lebanon are the trees, the Carmel and the Sharon, those are the fruits. Those are the fruits and the grains that are going to be grown. They're the most beautiful places. The Carmel and the Sharon can be the most beautiful places within Eretz Israel. Hema yir'u kivod Hashem hadar Elokeinu. They will see. Now, who are they, the Hema? So the Ibn Ezra says the Hema are the people in Yerushalayim. Will see the honor of God and the beauty of Elokeinu. The Radak says that it's talking about the Jews in general, the Jews who are returning to Eretz Yisrael at the time of the Geula, they're going to see it. The Malbim says that you're going to see the glory. What they're going to see is that with all of these things transpiring, with the fact that Edom has been vanquished, that the Jewish people are returning, that Eretz Yisrael is beginning to blossom all over again, they're going to see and understand the glory of God. Not just that, says the Dat Sofrim, it's the Hadar Elokeinu, the beauty of Elokeinu. Now, the difference between the Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elokeinu. Okay, so we know the Yud Kei Vav Kei is God's personal name. We've talked about it a whole bunch of times. When you refer to something by a personal name, that's relationship. That's the Yud Kei Vav Kei is the Midat HaRachamim, is the sense of mercy. God, you have mercy on people who you know. Okay, Elokeinu, okay, is more the God of the nature. That's why it's the plural. Okay, the natural forces. If you don't believe in God, you see, it's the wind that did this, the sun that did this, the this that did this. You don't realize it's God doing it. It's the Midat Hadin. Says the Dat Sofrim that even with the din that is going to be taking place, even the judgments that are taking place at the time of the Geula, people are going to see the Hadar in it. They're going to see the beauty that's in it. They begin to understand what God has been doing in the world. Chazku yadayim rafot. Strengthen your weakened hands, or the hands that have been weakened. Now, who is this going to? This, according to Rashi, is being said directly to the Nevi'im. It says to the Nevi'im, the people who talk about the Yeshua and the Geula, Nachamu et Yisrael v'chazkem. He's telling to them, listen, this is what's going to happen. You Nevi'im, make sure you convey this to them so they understand. Chazku is strengthen others. It's not chizku, it's chazku. You have to strengthen others. The Abarbanel says, no, this is not limited to the Nevi'im. This is referring to every leader of the Jewish people, the Chachamim in Yisrael, and those who are the great people in each and every generation. You need to strengthen the people. Interestingly, that's on the future. And I always tell people, here's the vision that we see. However, Rav Moshe ibn Jiktila is one of the Rishonim. He lived around the beginning of the 11th century, about 1020 is the estimate. We do have his comments in many other commentaries. There's fragments of them, and they have begun to collect his works. Most of his works were lost. It's available again if you want to see some of the comments of Rav Moshe ibn Jiktila. You can see it, even obviously Spanish. You can see it on the Al HaTorah website. They've begun to bring together these pieces as well. He says, no, this is not talking about the future. This is talking about the people who are coming back to Eretz Yisrael at this time. That these people who are coming back from the Galut, don't encourage them. Tell them things are going to work. It's going to happen. And in fact, the Dat Mikra takes the same position. He says that this is ultimately a promise that you have to give them. Not that the Nevi'im and the Gedolim have to convey this to them, but that God is actually, you have to tell them, God is going to strengthen your hands. God is going to make this Geula work. Uverkayim koshlot ametzu. And also the knees that are failing will be strengthened. Now, what is the difference between Yadayim and Birkayim? Obviously, different places on the body. Yadayim, those are the actions that a person does that are the physical actions, the things you want to do to build Eretz Yisrael, the things you're planning on doing. Birkayim refers to the spiritual. It's the knees. Think about it with the symbolism of the knees, of the bowing down to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the Dat Sofrim says, you need to strengthen both what they're going to do physically and what they're going to do spiritually. Imru, tell them, nimharei lev, to those who are impatient. Nimharei lev, you think it would come to the word maher, fast, those who are jumping too quickly. Chizku al tirau. Okay, those who are trying to push the Geulah too much and then see it's not working. Okay, this is Rashi's explanation. Rashi says that we've always tried to make sure the Geulah comes, and unfortunately, there's always been these disappointments along the way, even in our day. Okay, people imagine everything's going to be good, and we are now in the J.J. Schechter. Rabbi J.J. Schechter has this beautiful piece. He talks about the people who object to the Tfilah L'Shlom Hamdinah, saying the prayer for the state of Israel. Okay. He says it said, why do they object? Because it says Reshit Tzmichat Gulaten. He says it doesn't say it's the Gula. He says it doesn't even say that it's the beginning of the Gula. He says it's the beginning of the blossoming of the future Gula. It's like as far away almost as you can get. He said, nevertheless, people object. Well, here we're saying people sometimes rush it a little bit. Rashi says they have to be strong. You have to strengthen. And the Nabi Ezra says, okay, that they didn't believe. You have to strengthen the people who didn't believe they would ever see the salvation from the enemies. The Radak says, okay, that people who were just Nimaru Lev is not impatient for the Gula. The people who just couldn't handle it anymore because of all the tzoros they had. The Shadal, based on Jensinius, I think is how you pronounce it in English, one of the classic modern commentators, non-Jewish, he says very simply that the people who were the Nimharei Lev, the ones who were running, the heart running, those were the people who were always running away because they were too scared. You have to strengthen them. Don't run away. And you have to tell them, Hinei Elokechem nakam lavo. Your God is going, his nekama is going to come. Okay, Hinei. Whenever we say, at the end of the Gemara in Megillah, we talk about the parish of Hinei Elokeinu Zeh, Kivinu Lo V'Yoshienu. No, so there we talk about that at the time of the Geulah, all the tzaddikim are going to be dancing around HaKadosh Baruch Hu and pointing. Hinei, here it is. Okay, whenever you say Hinei, so the Dat Mikra says it's like here it is. Here is the Nekama Hashem is coming. Gimul Elokim hu yavo v'yosha'achem. And the recompense of God is going to come and save you. Now, what's the difference between Nakam and Gimul? Well, Nakam, the vengeance of God is going to be measured. Gemul means that there's a measurement here. This is an opposite too. Is whatever the appropriate measure of Nekama, God is going to do it. So don't worry about it. You have to encourage the people. And at that point, when all of this is going on, tipakachna einei ivrim, the eyes of the blind will be opened. Va'oznei chershim tipatachna, and the ears of those who are deaf will hear. What are the blind and what are the deaf? Well, according to Rashi, they're talking about those people who were not able to see your awesomeness, God. The people who just couldn't see, couldn't understand. Okay, the Rebbe Victor says it's the people who couldn't see the salvation. They saw all these things happening around them, and they just didn't understand what was going on. Those are issues of the spirit. The Abarbanel actually says they didn't even understand the impact that the galut, that the diaspora had upon them. all the negative pieces. However, the Dat Mikra suggests that it might be very simply, okay, based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin and Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Bet actually takes this. It's a medrash there, but the Dat Mikra says this could be a simple pshat of the psukim, that at the time of the Geulah, people's illnesses will be healed. Now, it's interesting because that goes against the classic Rambam, okay, who says that there's no difference between Yemot HaMashiach and now, except Shibud Malchuyot Bilvad, except the nations of the world are going to accept God. But it might be this might be talking about a later point as well. He says, look, what Yeshayahu was talking about at that time, people are going to be healed. Those who are blind, those who are deaf will be able to see and be able to hear. You'll be able to see and you'll be able to hear. People who always saw and always heard just didn't understand. Now you'll really understand it. You'll get what the whole picture, or it could be just meant literally. As yidaleg ka'ayal piseach. It's then when the lame will jump like an ayal, an antelope. Okay, at that point. Now, what does it mean? As yidaleg, it's very simply, okay, that Rav Schwab says, are we talking about, most of the Mefarshim don't say this meant literally. Now, if I take the literal approach of the Dat Mikra, by the way, it means the people who are lame are going to be able to start hopping around and running around. They'll be healed from their lameness. It could be. The way Rav Schwab explains it is very differently, and I realize I'm not, okay, is very differently. And he says, at the time of the Geulah, we're going to be able to accomplish things spiritually we had never accomplished before. The people who were crippled religiously, spiritually, are now going to be able to do things religiously, spiritually. It will come much easier to them. And then, v'taron lishon ilaim, and the tongue of the mute will be taron, from the same word ronen, from the same word to be joyful. The English word actually that translates to bets is one we don't use too often, jubilate. Okay, that the tongue of the mute will jubilate. At the very simply, according to Mitzudot, that it says very simply, taron comes from the word rina. And in fact, by the way, this phrase, if you think about it, we have incorporated into our tefillah. Not precisely, but if you think about the beginning of benching, when there's Sheva brachas, as ilaim b'shir yaron, and then the one who is mute, b'shir yaron, will burst out in song. This is talking about the time of the Geulah, when a husband and wife get married, the Sheva brachas. That's why we introduce benching, and we've used this as well. The Targum Yonatan, however, says a little bit differently, that the Jews at that point who were mute, the muted Jews, those were the ones who are going to be able to start speaking again. We will, in English, we would say, we will find our voices. The other possibility, Rashi says that this is talking about why were we called mute? Because in the time of the Galut, we had to learn to suffer our embarrassments. We couldn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, we were able to start responding to what had been taking place to us. Ki nivkeu bamidbar mayim v'nachalim ba'arava. Because in the wilderness has burst forth water, and the nachalim, nachal is a stream, good, will be opened up. Now, what is this talking about? Rashi says this is all mashal, this is all poetic, that ultimately, ki yitzmach yesha l'nidkaim pitom, that all of a sudden this kind of thing is going to happen. The pitom is not Rashi, but pitom means very simply, nifkeu is to burst forth. All of this is going to happen when you don't believe it. It's going to be sudden. The Ibn Ezra says that this is also a literal piece, that all of a sudden, there's going to be water everywhere. The people are coming back from the Galut, they're coming there to Israel, and they will have water provided for them wherever they go. V'haya hasrav la'agam. And the srav, the place that was the scorched deserts, the scorched places are going to be pools. They're going to be like lakes. Now, interestingly, the Shadal says Srav in Arabic and Srav in Persian doesn't mean a scorched place, but it means a mirage. And he says that the mirages will be actual sources of water. That when those things you imagined were there and weren't when you needed them, now they will be. Okay, that's what he says. Rashi says, no, that again, we're talking poetically, okay, that those who yearn for the salvation will find their salvation. Even Ezra says, no, this is talking about very simply the Sarav is a dry place, and therefore the dry places, it's part of the whole idea of the Gula are going to blossom like we started as well. Vayahas Rav Lagam v'tzimaon lemabu'ei mayim. And the places that were parched will be springs. Okay, what does it mean? Well, again, the same kind of piece. There is a parallelism to the previous part. The places where you had wanted to have water will either have water. The places where you needed things, you'll have the things you need. Or the Dat Sofrim says this is just a simple pshat, that wherever you're going to need water, there's going to be water that's available for the people. Okay, if you think about it, all of these things are talking about the rebirth of Eretz Yisrael, the rebirth and the return of the people in the diaspora, or the future return. That's the question. Is this talking about what the description of what will be, or is this the promise of what will be? Then, B'nevei Tanim Rivtza. Now, Neve is like a resting place, a home. Tanim, I showed you a picture last week. It could have been jackals or something like that, some kind of animal that lives in the deserted places. Rivtza, in this kind of case, it's going to be pastures. And not just that, chatzir lakane v'gome. That place is going to be a chatzir. It's going to be like a grassland for both kaneh and guma. Now, what is a kaneh and a goma? A kaneh and a goma are canes and reeds. And the description that Tzudat Zion says is that places that once upon a time were deserts are going to have a vast amount of water. How do you describe the vast amount of water? Well, if you just remember, along watersides, you have the reeds growing out of the water. The places which had nothing, all of a sudden will have everything present in that kind of case. Vayasham maslul v'derech hakodesh yikarela. And there's going to be a maslul and a derech, a path and a road. Or, as the Dat Mikra says, it's really a maslul v'derech is one phrase. It means a derech silula, a path that has been paved, thank you, or cut out, like a cutout path, a pathway that is made, a place that's easy to go through. Now, Ibn Ezra puts all these things together and says, wait a second, I've just been talking about this vast amount of water. Don't worry about the vast amount of water. You're still going to have some place to walk. You're going to be able to have a place to go through. And it's going to be, they're going to call it the Derech HaKodesh. Now, why is it going to be called Derech HaKodesh? Well, remember, Kodesh is something not just sanctified, but Kodesh is something that's separated. So according to the Mahari crowd, the Derech HaKodesh is a unique road for the Jewish people who are Kedoshim. This is going to be the Jewish road. Okay, you had the regal roads, you have the Jewish roads. The Dat Mikra says, no, it's simple. Derech HaKodesh, this is the path to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, this is the way you get to Eretz Yisrael. There's going to be a direct path. It's going to be better even than Highway 6. The Dat Sofrim says, no, this is a mashal. This is going to be a new path to achieve Kedusha. You'll have new ways to be able to get closer to the service of God himself. Lo ya'avrenu tamei v'hu lamo. It's going to be a place where the tameim, the people who are impure, are not going to pass that way. Now, the Dat Sofrim says this isn't talking literal in terms of person of purity, impurity, in terms of sanctification, in terms of the idea of going to the Beit HaMikdash. We're talking about the antithesis of the people we're calling Kedoshim. In other words, if you think about it, I have a Derech HaKodesh, and it's not going to be a place for tamei. So tamei is not the opposite of tahor in this case, they suggest. Tamei is the opposite of kodesh. Well, what's the opposite of kodesh? Okay, chol, the people who try to bring you down religiously, the people, and that's so from the Radak's approach, and it's ultimately lamo too. The people who are going to be passing it, that is this talking about to the people, Rashi says, it goes back to those people, the blind, the deaf, the people who, the lame, all of those people who now have seen the truth. Don't worry, there aren't going to be people who are going to take you away from it. Holech derech vavilim lo yitu. Okay. Holech derech, the people who are just travelers, and the avilim in this case, are the fools, the people who don't get it. Lo yitu, they're not going to cause us to err. They're not going to cause us to miss the road. Now, interestingly, Rav Schwab says the holech derech are just plain, the plain people. The plain people, and the avilim, those who are the non-believers. No one's going to take us off. And why? Because this road is going to take us, and this is the Ibn Ezra, this road is going to take us directly to Eretz Yisrael. It's going to take us to our ultimate goal itself. Lo yesham aryem ufritz chayot bal ya'alena. There won't be lions, and there won't be Fritz chayot, are impudent beasts that are not as dangerous necessarily as lions, but those who try to get at you anyways, will not ascend it. Now, what is this imagery? Well, according to the Marikra, the Aryeh is the symbol of Bavel. Bavel is referred to as a lion. Fritz chayot is actually the pig. Okay, Edom we find is referred to as the pig. So there won't be Edom, and there won't be Bavel. Your enemies won't be there on this road. The Ibn Ezra says that this is literal. If you take this sacred road, you're not going to be bothered by the large dangers or the small dangers. You'll be safe. Rav Schwab says, no. What are these dangers? These dangers, we're talking all about Kodesh, and we're talking about Tamei. This is the Yetzer Hara. There won't be that Yetzer Hara in you. There won't be any obstacles to you spiritually when you're on this road, when you're coming back. V'halchu geulim. What's going to happen? This is where the people who have been redeemed are going. Says, by the way, just one piece on the Malbim, just for 1 second. The Malbim actually translates the pasuk a little bit differently. The Malbim says the way I should translate the pasuk is like this: Lo yesh sham aryeh, okay, bal ya'alena, ufritz chayot lo timtza sham. In other words, it will not rise up and it won't be found. Okay, those are related to both the Aryeh and the Pritz Chayot. But the Malbim says this first phrase is talking to that phrase, and the second phrase, it's poetic the way it was done. Shadal says, no, what it means is in this phrase that the Aryeh and the Pritz Chayot won't come up on this road. Lo timtza sham, you're not going to find them anywhere. Not just on the road. You won't find those dangers. Yeah.
You will not be found.
Right. Lo timatzei sham. Right. You won't be. Lo timatzei sham. You will not be found there. Right.
Timatzei will be found.
But this is nekeva. Or you have two choices. It's either nekeva or akna.
So, or it's nekeva. Chaya. Lo timatzei. Chaya is nekeva.
It's chayot, but it's fritz.
Ufritz, the impudent. Right. So chayot is the feminine.
Again, it's okay.
So that's why.
Forgive him on the plural and the yachid.
Right. Ufritz chayot lo timatzeh sham. Right. That helps out the Malbim's position as well. It's the feminine. Ufduyeh Hashem yeshuvu. Now it's interesting. When I went over this pasuk, there were two stories to give you. One is when I went over the pasuk, I said, pasuk is really familiar. I've been saying it. I'm trying to remember where I've been saying it in Tefillah. And this is the final pasuk in the Tefillah that we've been saying for the Shvuyim and the Chatufim. Okay, for the hostages. It has this quotes this pasuk. And the other piece is, I had someone else came over to me and they said to me, there was something about the Ula, what's going to happen and how it's going to be. And I said, just look at the last pasuk. I had good timing to chazer over this parak. Look at the last pasuk in Parak Lamed Hey, because this is the ultimate promise that we have. Ufduye Hashem Yeshuvon. Okay, those who have been redeemed will return. Okay, the Jews who God has redeemed will return. It says from the Daf Mikra, from their enslavement. Uvau Tzion berina. They're going to come back to Tzion with song. V'simchat olam al rosham. The joy of olam will be on their heads. What is simchat olam? Rashi says it's the simcha of olam asher me'olam shayta lahem b'derech yetziat mitzrayim. I would translate simchat olam, the joy of yesteryear, or the joy of once upon a time, or the historical joy they will regain. However, the Malbim says no. Simchat olam means they will have eternal joy. It's olam means it's going to always be. Sason v'simcha yasigu. They're going to get both simcha and sason, not like they had, it points out the Malbim, when they came out of Bavel. If you remember, there have been 2 times so far we've come out of Galut. One is the Galut Mitzrayim, the other is Galut Bavel. When they came back from the Babylonian exile, it was a small number of the Jews, and it was a ragtag group that had come. And they were coming back to a hostile environment, and they were coming back to nothing. They had to build everything from nothing. The promise says the Malbim is no, it's not going to be like then, but rather it's going to be something where they're going to get the simcha, the sason and the simcha immediately. It's going to be unique in this type. Sason v'simcha yasigu v'nasu yagon v'anacham. And what's going to happen is at that point, the yagon and the anacha, the troubles and the moaning are going to run away. Now, if you think about it, this is another borrowed phrase. In other words, we had before from the Devay Aser. If you think about Shemona Esrei, Ashiva Shavtenu Rishona v'Yotzenu K'vatchila v'Nasu Yagon v'Anacha. That in the Shemona Esrei, we talk about bringing back the judges and our leadership. Okay, to the Jewish people, we say at that point the Yagon v'Anacha is going to run away. Using a play on these words, v'Nasu Yagon v'Anacha. What's the connection? So Rav Schwab says that the source of much of our troubles and tribulations in the Galut is because we don't have the leadership to show us the right way. At the time of the Geula, we're going to re-engage, or we're going to rediscover true leadership. Leadership, obviously, the Mashiach will be at the head of the leadership. And at that point, the Nasu Yagon v'Anacha, it's going to be the point of Ashiva Shovtenu Rishona, v'Yotzenu K'vatchila. Yagon v'Anacha. Now, Yagon v'Anacha are 2 different kinds of troubles. Yagon is an internal kind of trouble, and whereas Anacha is the outer kind, the moaning, where you have the expression of what's going on. Yagon is where you feel the galut. The anacha are the moans from the galut itself. And so if you look at this parak finishes off. We saw Edom the last time, and here we talk about the Geula, the beauty of Eretz Yisrael, the return of the people, the understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the salvation that he will offer to us. This is one of the great prakim in Yeshayahu that talks about redemption itself. Of course, to take things purely literally is to reduce them, and to imagine that we understand all of the mishalim, all of the different images that are given, that we understand them fully, is also to diminish them. So like, as I read last week from Rav Schwab, we don't really understand this parak, but if you let it sink in and take the big picture and the imageries that it has, you begin to understand the glory of the parak. With that, we're going to end today a little early. Everyone, if I don't see you, have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. And I have to make my daily pitch for the cause match. Please make sure you go on and off. And as I told the men at Minyan this morning, if we aren't successful, we're gonna make you suffer with a shul dinner. So if you don't want a shul dinner, contribute to the cause match.